couple.
Is there someone else that's going to sit next to Will?
Yes, Doug is coming in. Yeah, Doug,
Is this a 1 hour, hour
1 hour,
10? Okay.
1 hour. It could go over a little bit more, but generally we're going for an hour.
Sorry, take this slide.
Okay. Again, my big thing about it is I want it to feel very conversational and casual amongst yourselves. I feel free to like pipe in and talk about, comment on what people are talking about. This is a discussion more than, I don't want it to be me sitting here asking you questions. I want us to have a nice little conversation about making role-playing games. So, that is the aim.
All right, we are live from Kamcon 2024.
Hey, hello everyone.
And the crowd goes wild.
Go wild, crowd.
There you go. Cue crowd.
But then our moderator just left.
Thanks for coming, everybody.
Time to go home.
EMC has left the building, so okay.
Run around. This is part of the show. So,
Lord of the Flies.
let's do it.
Where's the conch? This is the conch. I have the Coke bottle. I know I know James is trying to find Doug and have our final panelist, so I think that's why he ran out. Is to get the final panelist because 5 wasn't enough.
No.
Has to be 6. If it isn't an even number, the sun implodes and we all die.
Yeah, normally I'm the guy that's late and everybody's waiting on me. That's a lot more fun than this.
Prima donna. I've said it before.
Feeling well.
No, you said I'm a dumbass. There's a difference. Prima donna's intentional. Dumbass is natural.
Yes, and you do come by it naturally, I think. So.
I do.
We'll see. As a result of that, you just gotta have to start like leaning into it. You have to like keep playing up the persona as much as you humanly can.
I have somebody bring me some water down for you guys too. Perfect.
Awesome. Yeah, I think our recorder will be sitting there.
Okay,
This is Douglas Lloyd of Better Press.
Hey, welcome.
William McAusland, Connor Heighton, Seth Skorkowsky, Jon Hook, Toren Atkinson.
Mars says, I gotta go talk to Toren.
Oh, man.
Okay, I gotta go talk to the other guys. Okay, how much time do we have? Not enough.
Never enough.
Never enough.
Everyone will be around. It's been nice that everyone's been very approachable during this. So it's like no standoffishness. From the superstars who've graced us with their presence.
The limousine helped.
Yeah.
You guys are getting limousines?
Well,
If you're calling my car a limousine, you need to.
It says limousine and spray paint on the side.
from this morning, because I did.
That's how I fool people. Are we ready to go?
We are live.
Okay. Well, welcome to the RPG Writers Panel, everyone. I think if you all introduce yourselves and just tell what you've done, what you do in the industry, that'd be kind of fantastic. We'll start over here with Toren Atkinson.
Hi, I'm Toren. I have been writing my own crazy, dumb role-playing games since probably 1985. But the only one that was published was Spaceship Zero in the amazing year 2002.
In conjunction with the album, right?
In conjunction with my band's concept album, my band being the Darkest of the Hillside. I think it's Cthulhu Rock Band. Yeah.
Cool. And Jon Hook.
Hi, my name is Jon Hook, and I am a writer and podcaster. I am primarily known for Call of Cthulhu adventure writing, but I've done some fantasy RPG style writing as well, D&D-esque, but not the D&D brand per se. And then Seth and I are podcasters for the Modern Mythos podcast, and we're up here repping. And I've been writing for probably since 2009. So
Excellent. Well, thanks for coming, Jon. We're glad you're here. And of course, Seth Skorkowsky.
I'm Seth Skorkowsky. I'm a fantasy and horror novelist. The RPG scene. I'm roasted on for my YouTube channel under the highly imaginative name Seth Skorkowsky. I do the Modern Mythos podcast with Jon Hook here, I've written scenarios and whatnot with Call of Cthulhu for Chaos Eve and Stygian Fox, Traveler with Mongoose Publishing, and soon to be released Cult Divinity Lost. My first scenario for them will be coming out. So that's my street cred.
That's pretty good street cred. Connor Heighton, a local writer.
Hi, I'm Connor Heighton. I have the least experience out of anybody at this table. I started writing in the year 2019 in October. I write a custom tabletop role-playing game called Osmond Ward, which is a steampunk gaslamp fantasy. I also worked on Lost Lorn, which is by Mark Reinhagen. Pleasure.
Yes. Well, William McAusland, also local.
Oh, yes. William McAusland. I work for Outland Arts as my company name, but I'm a freelance illustrator for Goodman Games. That's my sort of my day job. But I'm a writer and illustrator for the Meat and Clock RPG. I've been doing that since 2011.
Excellent. Well, again, thank you for coming in. And last but certainly not least, Douglas Lloyd of Better Press.
I've been freelance writing for about 15 years with the Pathfinder and Dungeons and Dragons series, mostly through small publishers, and then I had this crazy idea to create Better Press, which does comic books, a little bit of RPG stuff, and I mostly do that because I'm very dyslexic. I cannot spell at all, so I dabble, and I submit things. They go on Drive Through RPG, and I just go from there because it's fun.
Well, thank you for coming out, Douglas, and everybody. I'm James Drucker. I'm one of the coordinators here at Kamcon. I've done a little bit of writing myself, but nothing to the extent of some of the people on this panel here. But we'll see what happens with the future. But this is not about me. So I started relatively standardly. Maybe just throw it out there. How did you all get into role playing? Like, what was the impetus of your role playing kind of as a hobby, and how it maybe transitioned to something more professional? Maybe Doug?
Dungeons and Dragons came along in the late 70s. A buddy of mine said, "Hey, there's this great game, let's try it. We're going to create a high school Dungeons and Dragons club." We immediately were invited to the principal's office. And we were told, "You cannot do this, you cannot do that. You cannot call it a wargaming club." Our principal had been served in the military, and he said, "You can't do that." He looked at Dungeons and Dragons and said, "You guys are a bunch of goofballs. Just go and do your thing, have fun, but you have to stay in the arts room, because if you spill any of your dice on the floor, we're not picking it up." And it just went from there. It just kept bumbling along.
Yeah.
And, we never, D was for dog. My grandkids now have opened the book, and D is for dragon.
Yeah.
Us older people didn't see that coming.
No.
So yeah, it's.
That goofballs rule the world, man.
Oh, no kidding, and I'm honored to be with a more established group
Yes.
of
Well, I mean,
goofballs.
like, who on this panel hasn't identified themselves as a goofball in one fashion or another in their lifetime? In this room, perhaps. Connor.
Hi.
Yeah, how did you get into all this?
Oh, God, help me. I had a couple of very kind individuals who pulled me out of a popular kid group in high school that I was being bullied by. I got pulled into Amp which is fantasy sword fighting, like buffer sport stuff. And from there, they dragged me into D&D, kind of kicking and screaming. From there, I kind of just started knackering around with like a little bit of like custom world building. I was thinking I was going to actually originally try to publish indie press D&D modules, and from there it slowly developed where I was like, oh, I don't like I don't like fantasy swords and sorcery as much anymore. I want to just go into like guns and firearms and things like that, and it all kind of escalated from there, and now I'm here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like transitioning to like Seth's, like the novels you wrote were very kind of like steampunkish, like fantasy adjacent, were they not? Some of them.
That me?
Yeah.
No,
I thought I
mine's-
did say Seth.
Oh, I thought you said no. Well, I did some sword and sorcery stuff in the vein of like Fafhrd and Great Mausers and Liber. The rest of it's very modern day.
Oh, okay.
Like, just, no, that's just a lot more exciting.
Well, but how did you get into the hobby and generally in the beginning and transition to it being more professional, as it were?
I grew up in the American Bible Belt in the 1980s. So D&D was a game that drove you insane and made you kill your family, which means I desperately wanted to check it out. I believed that it had become illegal due to insanity, family murdering. So when I was 12 and in the 7th grade, there was that little magazine that's in your homeroom. It's mostly just advertisements to sell to kids, and there was one for the black box of D&D with like, it's back! Across the, I've actually been looking for that because I'd love to find a copy of that ad. And I remember I ran up to my buddy Aaron Bush and I was like, D&D's legal again! And like now that they had legalized it, I want to check it out. So I got it for my 13th birthday and very quickly found a friend of mine's dad who'd been running since the 70s. Ran throughout high school, college, spurned off into sci-fi and then in horror, and then left D&D behind and started doing everything else. So it was a really long journey, but it all began with, I want to check out this thing that could possibly make me insane and murderous. So because I'm 13 and that's what you do.
I somehow I completely like avoided the whole satanic panic thing. When I got into it, it was never a thing. It was like, when I heard about it after the fact, when I started getting into the hobby, it's like, really? People were that up in arms about this?
Oh yeah, man, it was in all the news.
So, you all know, I know now. I mean, but it wasn't a thing when I first got into it. I didn't realize that it was such a hubbub. Will, how about you?
Oh, I think my mother bought it for my brother and I when we were way too young for it. We didn't understand it, we loved the art though. I thought, when I saw monster drawings and the ink drawings of the early artists, I thought, nah, that's something I want to do. Way before we ever played it properly. We just made our own rules up and around, like we didn't even have the dice for it.
Yeah.
You know, like we couldn't get them. So I don't know how we worked it out, but then high school, we played every lunch hour. And we started customizing the rules so much that eventually became the Mutant Epoch system, the Outland system. And then I always knew I wanted to be an artist, so I got to be adjacent to the
Yeah.
And always knew I wanted to publish my own.
And you did.
So I ended up working for Goodman Games and learned how they were doing it, and yeah, that's history.
Right on. Toren, how about
Oh,
you?
hi.
Hi. I did forget about you.
It was the 1980s. I don't remember who exactly was to thank / blame, but I got a hold of the Monster Manual, and like Will, I was kind of very taken. I was a big comic book guy, so I'm very art oriented, so visually oriented. So I kind of grabbed onto that, and I ended up. I think I was the dungeon master before I ever was a player, which was probably a terrible idea. But my earliest memories are probably just like after we would play a game, I would draw a comic of what happened.
Nice.
So that I recommend that.
I remember being in a lot of gaming groups, and the artist was always, "Hey, can you draw my character so I can have it on my?" Yeah,
That's me. Yeah, I'm the guy that everyone asks to be in their group. Not because I'm a great role player, because I can draw their character.
I'm sure you're adequate.
Yeah, 3 out of 5 stars.
Yeah, right on. And John.
I mean, a lot like Doug. I was there when it was first coming out, and we started and had a D&D club at our school, and so that was a lot of fun. And people don't remember when TSR first came out. It wasn't just D&D. Like they were producing all kinds of games, and me and my friends, we were just collecting everything that came out. So we were just playing all the different games. The modules couldn't come out fast enough, and so because of that, we were creating our own. And so we were doing writing even then as a kid, as we're just designing. I mean, they were just dungeons. We were just designing dungeons and stocking them, and there was no thought to the ecology or anything that went into them. So they were just madcap adventure things. But yeah, it was great.
There were no bathrooms?
no bathrooms. You didn't question how a dragon got into that tiny room in the first place. We just built the dungeon around it. Don't move. Brick. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always kind of like that. It's like I never had a chance to have a school group myself, just friends, and it was funny because you're talking about like the getting away from the cool kids who are picking on you and hanging out with the nerds and learning role-playing games that way. I thought all the nerds were the cool kids, and they were playing role-playing games. So I'm like, I want to hang out with these people, and that's sort of how it happened. When you guys first started like writing and getting into it, who are your like major influences, like even with and without the hobby itself, like books, movies, filmmakers, and even role-playing game creators? Is there any specific people that like really inform your work as you were creating? It's like particularly in the video and anything that's like carried through.
For inspiration like that, I always look at other adventures because, from my perspective, doing game design and trying to create an adventure, right? Because I'm not creating whole games. I'm not that good. I just do these little booger adventures. But I look to other game designers and what they've done because I don't. When you're writing these things, you're writing for an audience of one. You're writing for the one guy who's going to read the adventure and then interpret what you did for their game table. And that interpretation can go super close to what was written or very widely from what was done. And both games are equally good. They're equally good interpretations of what was written down, because the players are not writing what I wrote. And so when you're designing an adventure, you can't, in my mind, I'm sure other people have found ways to do it, but you can't write it like it's a novel and have a mystery. You're not entertaining the potential game master. They have to have all the tools, which is why game writing is technical writing. It's not prose, flowery adventure writing stuff. I do like to be able to have box text. Like, I enjoy writing box text. I enjoy, having a section where I can say, read this out to the players, right?
Yeah.
And then I get to, be flowery and, say these things and hopefully make people go, ooh,
Yeah.
So.
I think that's the difference between like writing a novel and then writing adventures. And Seth, that would probably be a transition for you. Because were you writing any professional adventures before your noveling?
No.
No.
But I kind of bounce off of John there. I see writing a scenario like a recipe. You want to know before you start cooking a recipe exactly how much of each ingredient you need. You need to know what this thing's going to look like at the end and how many people it serves. So it needs to be kind of upfront. This is for 4 to 5 characters of so level. This is what it's going to be, and let's get going. Versus ones that I've read where you're 2/3 the way through, and then it reveals to the game master who the bad guy is, and say, I should have known that on page 1.
Yeah.
Because it's not meant to be a surprise to me. Yeah, I need to know how to surprise my players with it, but I need to go in knowing this.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of I see it as a recipe.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. But I think that sort of like kind of echoes the whole idea of it being a technical process more so than, well, in conjunction to being a creative writing process at the same time. So that sort of makes sense. What about you, Connor? Considering your more freshness to the genre.
You kind of caught me off guard with this one, I'm not going to lie.
Excellent.
On the upside, I know exactly kind of where I centered from.
Mm-hmm.
When I very first started doing my writing, I wanted to kind of focus on the nautical aspect. So I did a lot of reading of Jules Verne, Perry Rodin. I did bits and pieces of Pulp Fiction. I watched a lot of Pirates of the Caribbean. And kind of that that influenced the early design for my world, but I went from there into like Fistful of Dollars, Clint Eastwood, Butch Cassidy, things like that, and I kind of started to amalgamate all of that. But the piece that I really hooked onto was Jules Verne, and specifically stuff like Journey to the Center of the Earth, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, that kind of thing. Nowadays, I feel like I've kind of gone off to a side and I've focused a lot more on the TTRPG aspect of it. So I look at stuff like Flying Circus, if you know what that is, which is dogfighting stuff. I've talked to her extensively about my own system. I've gotten advice from the guy who wrote Delta Green. I've worked
Dennis or Shane?
Dennis, I believe. And then I've also done stuff with like talking with the creator of Wanderhome, Jade Dragon, things like that here and there. And that's really helped me come into my own style. But like, you got to look at the past in order to influence the future, right? And likewise, you got to look at the older guys around you in order to really influence. Like you got to learn from what everybody else has done. I'm 26, man.
I'm creeping up on 50, so I'm an old guy now too.
But yeah, like generally, you got to learn from everybody else to make your own decisions. Right?
Well, what about one of our grognards here, Doug? What were your inspirations when you were starting way back when?
Well, my background is technical writing, as you know, many years, and with technical writing, this is my objective, this is how I got there. So as was pointed out, the dungeon master, the GM, whatever you want to put your hat on, they have to know where you're getting. The first thing I wrote, somebody said, well, this is good, it's like technical writing, and I go, oh, that's bad writing. No, that's okay. And then I got books, you know, can I be an average writer? So on writing by Stephen King, anything I could find that told me I was either average or crappy at it. And then, you know, read everybody's stuff, learn from them, don't copy them, they're your inspiration. So yeah, I just read and write. Write because you can, not because you're any good at it. Because the more you write and the more you read, it's like, it's the bicycle thing. The more I ride my bicycle, the better I get.
Definitely.
Writing RPG adventures or games is the same thing. Practice.
I've had people I have conversation with who ask, like, well, how do you keep writing? I said, well, you keep writing. And it's like, well, what if it's terrible? Then it's terrible. It doesn't matter. It's like, as long as you're putting something out on the page. When me and Connor were working on Lostlorn, one of the instructions I got was like, just write anything. Because even if it's bad, we can fix it after the fact. And it's like, okay, that's interesting. It makes it kind of freeing. Because things can be tweaked. You can fix it. I think the idea is just to get the ideas out on the page, and then you can mold it, turn it into a statue. And it's like the quote of shaving off what doesn't belong there until you have exactly what you had originally imagined. So, William?
Well, I've got coming from two aspects. There's the writing part and then there's the art part. And for RPGs, one thing I love about them is kind of like comics, I suppose, is that they're connected. You can't really have one without the other. I mean, I used to not even buy a game book if there wasn't enough art in it, because I'm kind of half here for the art.
Yeah, exactly.
So for going back old school is Bill Willingham for the ink, and Earl Otis, and then for color it was Keith Parkinson. Really influenced. And Clyde Caldwell and all those guys that really influenced my style back then. But as far as writers go, a lot of it comes from the fiction, like Robert Burton. And for games, it's Joseph Goodman, who wrote the Dungeon Crawl Classics RPG. And of course, I've known him for 20 years, but he heavily influenced, like, you can really do it. We just started out as a guy kind of writing stuff in his basement, and now he's got quite a sizable company.
I've heard from so many people about how approachable and how supportive Joseph Goodman is to the people that he works with. Like Brendan LaSalle was talking about that on the podcast I watched the other day. And just everybody I've talked to who's worked with Goodman has said nothing but great things. And it sounds like a fantastic outfit to work with, and I'm kind of jealous.
I've worked with tons of different companies as an illustrator in this industry, and he's top of the pack, and the nicest guy in the industry for sure.
Yeah, so I heard. That's awesome. But again, getting back to the inspirations, does anybody have any like specific inspirations that is like, this is something that changed the game for me in terms of becoming a creator as opposed to just somebody who played the game?
talking with Ernie Gygax over Skype years ago.
Mm-hmm.
He said, you know, this is what I did. I like Canada. You have good beer. and he went to talk about his father did get money when he was kicked out of TSR and things like that. And we would talk for like 2 hours, and you know, if I'm talking at 10 o'clock at night, he's in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. It's early in the morning, but it's, no, you want to talk about D&D? Like, I'm good for hours. And I'm like, really? Oh yeah. And just that connection, and I found that with anybody that, I don't know, worth their salt as a GM or a writer, they want to tell you stories. They want to encourage you.
Oh, yeah.
And like you say with Goodman Games, that's just the fact that, hey, we're all equal.
Yeah.
Let's talk gaming.
Totally. I've been so encouraged ever since starting Kamcon, the approachability of nearly everybody I've spoken to in the industry, from superstars in the industry to people who are writing stuff on Drive-Thru RPG for their own creation, kind of like Connor as well. Everybody is approachable, and that's kind of like the perfect way of putting it. People are excited about this hobby, and they want to talk to other people about it. And I think everybody kind of feels like paying that forward is the best way to do it. And I've felt that myself in my own interactions. I mean, the fact that I have such a stellar cast of people here to talk about with this is kind of like proof positive of how accessible this community is to each other. It's kind of, especially this day and age when sometimes it's hard to find that common ground with the people who make the things we love. I love being a part of this hobby and being able to talk with the people who inspire me and have taught me over the years. So,
one thing when it comes to inspiration that was very pivotal for me, when I was starting off, we were playing D&D, and I read a bunch of old AD&D adventures, and they were all dungeons, and most of them, honestly, are pretty bad. There's not much story. It's usually just a location. And that was kind of how I approached role-playing in general. And we would play like Cyberpunk 2020. Instead of a dungeon, it was a skyscraper. But other than that, it was pretty much the same as like a D&D. We had attack instead of magic. That was it. But then I started reading a couple of the Atlas Games Cyberpunk adventures. And I got to see how they crafted those types of adventures for that type of game and that type of setting. And it completely switched how I viewed it. It was mind-blowing to me because of how they incorporated the different skills that we thought were kind of useless into being absolutely critical.
yeah.
And that completely altered how we approached like sci-fi and cyberpunk from that moment onward. And I need to reread some of those old scenarios to see if they actually were good or if they were just what I needed at that time.
Rose-colored glasses kind
Well,
of thing.
yeah, to me, it absolutely blew my mind.
Yeah.
And my players laugh about how all of our sci-fi games completely switched, like immediately.
Yeah.
Because it just introduced me to a different way of playing. And with Call of Cthulhu, people always talk about Lovecraft. The best Call of Cthulhu scenarios are more Agatha Christie
Yeah.
than H.P. Lovecraft, because to me that's an investigative mystery game that also happens to have this horror slant. But Agatha Christie wrote mysteries with great casts of characters and weird settings and all the stuff we love in a good Call of Cthulhu game. It just then becomes darkness and tentacles.
Yeah.
So I
Throw
also,
that in and
so I also see like skipping out of your normal genre and really broadening what you're looking at outside of what you're used to looking at is actually the best tool. Such as if you want to write the best, Lovecraftian horror, read a nice British murder mystery author lady, and you'll get and that's where you'll actually find that angle, because otherwise, if everybody's just copying the same thing, it all becomes stagnant, it all kind of becomes boring, and so really break out of that niche, and that's how you get to inject something new to the formula.
Yeah, I kind of felt like, as a visual person, I would take my inspiration from movies, I would take them from comics, I would take them from book cover. I would actually go to the comic store. Didn't have a huge budget, but the previews were free. So I'd take a previews and I'd cut out images that inspired me, and I would like put them in my book, and I was like, okay, I'm going to make an adventure based on this. You know, it was probably a cover for some Forgotten Realms book that I never read, but the image on the cover was like, okay,
works. Very evocative. Well, I mean, when you're talking about Forgotten Realms books, it's like Larry Elmore doing some of those covers. And stuff. It's like,
for sure.
They're epic.
And if like the best, I always say the best images for role-playing games, especially, is something that tells a story.
Yeah.
It's not just a bunch of heroes posing. It's something's happening.
Exactly.
To really get your imagination.
Exactly. It's like fuel for the fire, as it were. Connor, you had something?
I was actually going to ask you, you say that stuff like Agatha Christie is really good for Call of Duty. What about stuff like Hercules Poirot, like Murder on the Orient Express? Would you say going even further into the mystery and kind of cutting out the horror would work well with things like Eldritch Horror? Or would you say that the horror has to be there for Eldritch to work?
Well, the horror is usually something that happens to the characters, the players, but the mystery is what they're doing. And since a good adventure is about what is it the player characters are doing, it should focus a lot on the mystery. The horror is going to happen as they uncover more and more. I mean, like same time, one of the most popular Call of Cthulhu campaigns of all time is Horror on the Orient Express.
Yeah.
I mean, like they embrace that.
Yeah,
They're perfectly aware that that's where a lot of the roots stem from. But at the same time, like as a kid, what was it? Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. I probably ripped off every single frame of that movie across 50 D&D games over decades of these cheesy old movies were so inspiring. From like, oh my God, I'm going to do the part where they wake up in the roc's nest, or oh my God, I'm going to have to stream that's actually wine, or oh my God, I'm going to do the little boy genie, oh my God, I'm going to do the dragon versus the Cyclops. It's just.
Movies definitely inspired me because I was a filmmaker for a while, and so whenever I'm writing and whenever I'm GMing, it's definitely from a very cinematic kind of lens, and I lean into that. I like a lot of action. I like a lot of adventure. So I want my characters and players and set pieces in the stuff that I write to have that kind of action and adventure flair. I want people to have opportunities to do really cool stuff. So it's like, I want to fly across the room in my skivvies, waving a hammer around, which is a reference to something that happened last night.
I mean, let's be honest, who doesn't?
Well, okay, maybe let's go into more of the crunch bit. Does anybody have it, just share maybe like a process they have in terms of creating for RPGs in particular, specifically? Throw it out? Or should I pick on someone?
So, I mean, since I primarily do Call of Cthulhu writing, I will normally have, before anything, and I'm just going to start a project, I'll have this image of what the ending will be. What is going to happen when the characters come to this event? And I'll work backwards from there. I'm like, how do I get them from just having their normal daily lives to, they're on this boat and a kaiju has come out of the water to attack them? How do I get to that point, right? I'll have vignettes of images, and I want to try and figure out how can I get that one in, how can I get that one in, and eventually you've done, once you do it enough, you're like, oh, well, now I have a whole adventure, right? So I'll start from the end and kind of work backwards to the front.
That works.
I do the opposite.
Oh?
I usually come up with a hook. Oh, this is a good idea, and then I'll just start play tests, even if I don't have, a final how to win scenario. I will. I hope my players can give me some good ideas of possible, because I kind of feel like there can be multiple endings depending on the quest or whatever. But yeah,
actually with all my writing, it's actually a mix.
Yeah.
I usually start with the part that gets stuck in my head. It could be the beginning, it could be the end, it could be the middle. of either, man, what would we do if somebody just, like, if the character's got a box of severed thumbs? Okay, there's a hook. Like, what do we do? Or there is the end. You know, the big kaiju rises up. Like, okay, how did we get here?
Yeah.
How did we do that and go back? Or sometimes it's just in the middle, and it's like some really cool scene, and then kind of like
Spider out from there.
goes out. And sometimes it comes across a separate idea that I thought was going to be something completely unrelated, and it's like, oh wait, no, that bolts perfectly in here, and then it just kind of organically grows. But it usually begins with a scene, and then I have to figure out either what happens next or how we got to that scene.
Yeah.
Or both.
Definitely. Connor.
Same kind of as the other guys. I come up with a really good hook, and then I kind of spiral for a little bit, and then I ask the rest of my crew. The one thing that I kind of try to do differently is when I write something, I don't focus on my own imagination. I take bits and pieces from a bunch of other places to get a baseline, and then I use my imagination to kind of take that and move it to the left a little bit, right? Like move it away from the source material and kind of make it my own thing. So for example, with the module that I'm currently running tonight, I took bits and pieces from the spring cleaning scene in The Mummy, where there's a guy who's like trying desperately to organize through a room, and you pick up a chair. I like you know. But I've taken that, and it's like, yeah, all of the enemies have improvised anything, and they're the ones throwing the chairs at you as you enter the room, right? They're all unarmed, and you're just fighting these guys, right? Stuff like that. I like taking interesting scenarios and twisting it over, or like reversing it. But also, I like to take, again, from literature and other places, and kind of combine tiny pieces into one larger whole, essentially. It's hard for me to do it because I have really bad ADHD, so I constantly get lost and disappear into random rabbit holes.
Shiny object.
Yeah, but those rabbit holes also connect too, right? And it helps because I can then take those disparate pieces and I'm like, how did we get here?
Yeah.
Exactly the same kind of deal. And those threads help build a greater web.
Yeah.
You know?
I find myself doing the same thing, where and it's not as much. It's kind of almost a forced ADHD because I often like to try and find something I can ground some of my stories in with some reality. So it's like, okay, I'm writing a story about this, so I need to research this little thing, and that becomes its own rabbit hole. And all of a sudden, there's this little detail that I'm like, oh, that would be really great in here, and so shift everything here. And I'm kind of like edit as I'm going kind of writer, because I'll write 10 pages, and then I'll come up with this new idea, and like, oh, okay, I need to go back and make sure this works coming into here, and then go forward a bit and make sure this works because I'm leading into it. But I love that research rabbit hole, and I'm finding more and more it affects my own process. It's like, that's the funnest part, is finding this real information to present to both the player and the GM and say, this actually happened, so you can go check it out yourself and understand where all these reference points are coming from. But it also, it makes it more approachable for my purposes. Because when you're, especially when you're running for players, if you're being a GM, the easier it is for them to understand the world that you're creating for them with as little explanation as possible, the easier it gets. And it's kind of one of the reasons I stopped GMing fantasy role-playing. It was getting samey for me, but also I knew that there's so much more I had to explain. So I'm like, okay, let's do some real-world kind of, like I was using D20 Modern was the first thing I got into, and it was so much easier because it was like, okay, you're in Vancouver. I didn't need to explain anything else to any of my players. You know, it's like, oh, you go to BC Place. It's like, okay, we know where that is. We know what that is. We know what's around it. It's like, and so it takes off so much pressure. And if you can do that in the writing as well, it makes it easier for the GM who's interpreting your work to translate that to the players as well. So, but there are also people who do the inverse and want to hyper explain everything and say, this is specifically what I have in mind about this place and this is its history. And then you're dealing with probably some people who are coming up with a lot more of their own information and own setting stuff. Probably like with Osmond Ward, what you're doing there. So.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of, there's so much in the real world in terms of history and geography that you can, like for example, I run post-apocalyptic, and like you say, it's all like, it's Castle Fun Park in Abbotsford,
Yeah.
but it's after after 200 years after the bombs have dropped, or
Mhm.
whatever. And but you can do the same thing for like fantasy. You just and maybe the players will pick up on it, and if they do, that's great. If they don't,
Yeah.
then that's good too.
Yeah, well, I think that's where like the movies and stuff, like, you're drawing from films and stuff that have these iconic moments or iconic places. Did the same thing when I was writing Star Wars. Yeah, they know some of these places just because everybody's seen these movies. Yeah, you go to Hoth, boom. Most people know what Hoth is. You don't need to explain it anymore. Or the Alien. Yeah. Although not
We have
everybody
two
knows what the
players who've
Alien
never
is.
seen an alien movie, have any clue what it's about.
Unbelievable.
Looking lady with a big rocket launcher. That's about it.
But you've never seen Alien?
I've never seen Alien. What? Never seen Alien.
I haven't either.
Yeah, oh, okay, well, you two are coming over.
Can we just
Doug, your process.
Oh, I've got 3.
Okay.
The science fiction, which I will never publish, my grandkids can publish it, or maybe the kids. I see something and it becomes what's known as flash fiction. I write it down, I scribble it, it's done. It's in a binder. My playing for my homebrew is, okay, what do we want to do 2 weeks from now? Jot, that's it, it's done. For something I want to publish, I have a vision, I have an idea, and I build on it. I get a bunch of ideas together, I throw it out at people and let them play test, I refine it, I take some criticism, then I get an editor that James has recommended, and I give him gray hair, and he goes, what are you doing? What's the difference between this sentence and that sentence? And I go, I have no idea, I'm dyslexic, and he goes, wow. You can almost hear the swear word being dropped, but he doesn't tell me that. But I take that, and if it takes me a year to make something that somebody likes, it's publishable, and I do hire good artists, because this is a visual thing, whether we admit it or not. And then, it comes out as an RPG adventure. So that is a very long, mechanical, thoughtful process.
The editor you're working with is Keith Maggio from the Titterpigs? Yeah.
Yeah, did you notice how his hair is turning gray and receding?
I thought that was me, but
no, that's me.
No, he's a very good editor, good proofreader. He's done a couple of my things as well. So. Sorry?
We have questions.
No, question, sure.
You were mentioning inspirations and processes, and everyone was mentioning videos and books and authors. I was wondering if anyone took any inspiration from video games. So, like, I'm not trying to overshadow anything, but I'm working on a game and it's taking a lot of inspiration from a specific steampunk video game called Arcanum. So I was wondering if anyone else took inspiration from video games.
I ran a campaign. I played Hexen, which was like the antecedent of Doom, I believe.
Yeah.
And I just ran it. I just mapped out all of the levels and ran. And it was a terrible failure because it was just running around in a maze and shooting and fighting things. So that was a valuable lesson for me. Don't just try to replicate a video game. But take inspiration from certain things and do it better.
I ran a very successful D&D campaign that lasted months based off of kind of the setup before it spun off its own direction from a video game called Gothic, where they were basically a prison camp that was built inside of a force field that you can only pass one way through, and how the cultures in there all split up into their own things. And it was this wonderful little sandbox them trying to get out. So, yes. And then afterwards they all played it and they realized how much I just liberally stole and wasn't
I've got a solo adventure called Dog Days, and it is for just you playing against the rules, no GM or anything.
Oh, okay.
So, and I guess I do take an influence from like Doom and Quake and the first-person shooter. So mostly in the art though. So I have just the guy's hands holding some relic weapon that I know he would have found, or she would have found in the other room or something. So I just doing the art, and people really enjoy that. I want to do a lot more of that because people. a lot of people come from computer gaming into tabletop.
Yeah.
Used to be the other way around now.
Yeah.
So, and I know a lot of people who are gaming, they're just gaming more. Like tabletop when they can get with their friends, or when they're home, they're playing their Xbox.
Yeah, well, it's definitely evocative. I think, and far from it for me to say something as broadly as this, but I think there is no wrong place to get inspiration for whatever you want to create. So if you want to get inspiration from video games, fly at it. There's nothing wrong with that. If you want to get inspiration from the nightly news, you know, go to it. You know, there's no wrong way to be inspired. So and don't let anybody ever tell you that. That's just silly. Yeah.
Just a quick question about, sounds like everybody's like, they're very narrative inspired and stuff like that, but it's role-playing games that we're playing, and they tend to be like crunchy mechanics and that sort of thing. And I know like Call of Cthulhu is like the basic role-playing system, which is really accessible, but how much does mechanics of the game play into what you're writing and inspire that?
It takes a little bit of work. I know that one of the big crunches for us when we designed Osmond Ward is we designed it with the idea that you cannot revive. There's very little healing in the game. And once you die, you are dead. You start a new character from scratch. So we had to figure out how the hell do you heal when potions don't exist. And what we came up with was the exact opposite, where we had to bring in, well, like we brought in a pharmacist, like an actual licensed doctor who has a pharmacology degree, and had him like essentially explain us through the process of how you make medication and how you would like essentially translate that to potion making. So the crunch came in as we had to figure out like 100 different custom potions designed based off of ingredient lists and things. And as a result of that made a lot of tables. The game came down to, in order to get that to work with a player base, we had to cut a lot of stuff. We had to like completely adjust like formatting. Formatting is huge in a game like this because if you just have constant endless tables and very small text, you can't read anything. It's all gonna just mix up in your head, right? But as a result of that, it took us a year and a half of work to try and make that flow properly. And even now, the crunch is still enough that there's struggle sometimes with new players because they get faced with a big list, right? In order to develop around it, I think that you need to have a specific kind of GM or developer who knows what the player can see and what the GM can see, and knows how to mash those two together effectively.
Yeah, like obviously scenario writing and RPG system creation are two very different things. But there is kind of a bleed over. There's a lot of like Toren, you created Spaceship Zero, and William obviously the new NEPOC. But for the writers as well as you guys, how does it shift? Because like building off that question, between using different systems, how does that affect the creation of your content? Can you do you believe it's possible to have any type of content in any type of system, or do systems, are they a lot more kind of focused on the types of stories that are being told?
The system doesn't matter except for when it's the only thing that matters. Well, no, like I'm sorry, you can't do effective like horror with 5e D&D because you're a superhero. The more fragile your character is, the more effective the horror is. And even though, yes, you could do it, it is not the system best for it. And if you pull it off, great, you defied the odds. But it was really stacked against you. Now, when it comes to like when you're writing a story or a scenario or whatever, and the mechanics, it needs to work within them, but you can also use the mechanics as the basis for it, such as my favorite sci-fi role-playing game, Traveler, has certain mechanical things that happen. You jump, it takes 1 week. Okay, we're going to do an entire scenario that takes place during that week when you're trapped in a pocket universe, where the mechanics are what inspires the story. Or we're going to really embrace this mechanic aspect of the game, which is usually kind of boring. And we're actually going to lean into it if this is going to be the basis for the whole adventure of trying to get stuff to get on the ship that you could take somewhere else and sell it. And instead of glossing past it, we can do it. Some of the more interesting Call of Cthulhu scenarios will take the sanity mechanics and turn it on its head to where sanity now means something else. So this game has a complete twist to a mechanic that everybody at the table is pretty familiar with. All of a sudden it means something else. And that kind of adds to that mystery and excitement, because this mechanic we all know and love, or know and tolerate, however you feel about it, is now not working the same. Whoa, what's up? This is strange, and that, which that's one of the things Alex does fantastically. So, yes, the mechanics should be invisible when you're working on the adventure, but at the same time, if you can really find one that you can just dive into and make the game about it, that's really cool.
Yeah.
So, and I do want to hear your question, but I wanted to answer real quick, because famously with Call of Cthulhu, there's the spot hidden mechanic, which, a lot of even designers, as well as just, the casual game master, sometimes will get kind of tunnel vision, and they'll think, okay, well, to find the clues, you need to have your successful spot hidden. And so the Delta Green guys, no, not the Delta Green, the Pelgrane Press Trail of Cthulhu guys, famously thought, well, instead of having to have that mechanic, we'll just give you the clues, right? So in Trail of Cthulhu, you don't roll to find your clues; they're just given to you. But I think what they've discovered is that opens up new problems, because they thought they saw a problem in Call of Cthulhu having the, well, there's always, you can fail. And the thing is, there needs to also be a hybrid between rules and rulings, right? You need to empower your game master to feel free to break the rules as written, and just have this table's interpretation of those rules. And, I know the book says that we're going to do it this way here at this table. 9 times out of 10, every player at the table will go, okay.
Yeah.
And they'll just roll with it, because they want to see what's going to happen next.
Going back to inspirations, do you guys stay away from any inspirations specifically, or are they all like fair game?
I think they're all fair game. I was going to say, one of my inspirations actually came from one of my best friends when I was a kid. Because when I was a kid and I'm trying to design things, I was very tunnel vision. I was a terrible game master and terrible player, and I'd never thought outside of the box. I was coloring completely inside the box. And that made my imagination very stagnant, and I wasn't growing. And so one of the games that we had, because as I said, TSR was putting out a lot of games. And so one of the games was Marvel Superheroes, right? Freaking love Marvel Superheroes. And so my best friend was the game master for that. And I was so accustomed to just like these, just one-shot adventures. And sure, the characters carried over and you leveled up, but you didn't learn anything. You didn't really, you weren't bringing any real experience with you. My buddy starts running this Marvel Superheroes campaign, and he introduces these villains. These, we didn't know it at the time, but they were sisters, and they all had these cool like gem powers and stuff. And you had your storylines with your hero characters, and you had your storylines with your secret identity characters. And long story short, too late, I get it. My character's girlfriend, who we were having a relationship and everything, as I sent these superhero women to prison, I realized my girlfriend is one of the prisoners, and now he has this storyline where I'm breaking her out of jail because she's pregnant and all this stuff. And I was like, this is an amazing story, and it has stuck with me for 40 years, right? And this 12-year-old kid did this story. I'm like, man, Chris, you're so smart. I love you.
Did help because I know every writer. I don't know any writer who hasn't had this. The struggles of creation, writer's block, just not having the right idea, not feeling happy with the work. Maybe get your own feelings on those, how you deal with it, what you've had to deal with. Toren?
Shower. Go to the shower. All my best ideas come to me when I'm in the shower. Or on a bike ride or
Yeah.
walking, and then I'll just take my phone out and
Yeah.
dictate something that I thought of.
That's where I get my ideas.
Yeah.
Toren shower.
Yeah.
I too like to enjoy the shower.
I got the last 2 months.
Rental guidance suggested.
John?
It's funny. I just came out of a 3-year writing block, period. I wasn't writing or creating anything for 3 years, not really counting what we do in the podcast. But I just couldn't create or write anything. And, a lot of it comes from like imposter syndrome. Like I feel like I don't deserve to be over here on this side of the table. I don't deserve to be writing things and having my name on the cover and stuff. And it took a long time. And then, just recently, it was actually earlier this year, a buddy of mine is running a Kickstarter. It's already over. He ran a Kickstarter to reprint a book that I was in. And he said, hey, one of the stretch goals is we're going to have another book. And do you want to be in that? And I was like, yeah. And suddenly, just him asking me to be in this other book, I wrote a new scenario, which is what I'm running here at the Kamcon this year. So I wrote that specifically for the new scenario that's going to be in Dark Seas of Inspiration.
You're running that tonight and tomorrow?
Yeah, I ran it yesterday.
Yeah.
I'm running it tonight. I'm running it tomorrow.
Okay, so be sure to check out his game if you haven't signed up for it already.
What time tonight?
8 o'clock.
8 o'clock, yeah.
All right.
8 o'clock.
Seth?
Man, I used to have the best ideas when I was commuting to work.
Yeah.
Because I hated every aspect of that, so it was my escapism. But I'll also do walks, but one of the tricks that I've done to escape writer's block on a project is to work on a different project. Pretty much my entire Black Raven series are moments of writer's block on another project I was working on at the time. And I would basically pause it, knock out this 6,000 word sword and sorcery thief heist, and then I would go back to my big epic novel. And the epic novel is now the book in the drawer that's unpublishable crap, but I published all the little thief heists that I did when I was suffering writer's block, so.
Yeah, I kind of do that myself, just moving around from project to project. But then all of a sudden you've got 5 different projects that you've got writer's block on, and I'm like, oh God, what do we do now? I'll just start another project.
Add more balls to the juggler.
Yeah, exactly.
Start a band.
If I was more musically inclined, but I don't think they need trumpet players anymore. So.
Join a band if you don't want to just deal with your but 4 of your best friends.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Honor.
I'm just staring at my other friend who I helped with writer's block as of 2 days ago. Anyway.
And how did you help him?
A lot of one-on-one talking.
Yeah.
He knows, he's laughing, he gets it.
I hooked you guys up, didn't I?
So, a lot of what I do with writer's block, oh boy. Well, I'm permanently in a state of writer's block, constantly, forever, for the rest of my life.
Welcome.
But actually, I get similar kind of deal. The scenario that I'm running is after 2 years of writer's block. I don't quite know what happened that broke it. I just kind of started writing one day, and it just happened to flow properly. I think my biggest issue is due to the way that I operate with my ADHD and things like that, I can get stuck on things, right? So I'll be writing a scenario and I'll come to a specific mechanic or a specific setting or a place, and I cannot move past it until I'm done. And by that same token, I freaking hate every second of writing. So I'm sitting there staring at this thing like a big rock in my path, and for some reason my brain doesn't click that I can just walk around the path and keep going, right? So very recently I've, for some reason, just started learning how to go around the rock and coming back to it later. And as results of that, out of nowhere, I was able to knock down 70 pages when I barely managed 10 last year, you know?
Nice.
And all of a sudden it was all finished and polished and ready to go by the time the Kamcon rolled around, so I'm running it now.
Good.
I think there's a danger of mistaking writer's block for just being exhausted or tired. And but not just exhausted physically, but you've exhausted your current workspace. Like I'll switch from my laptop at Starbucks, which sometimes I don't know, I couldn't work on this at home, but suddenly I'm out here at Starbucks in public where everyone's talking, and it just comes to me, it just pours out faster than I can type. Or other times go to bed and I just start typing on my phone in the Notes app. And there it is. Like I tried to write the introduction for my current book for 3 years. I just, no, I don't like that. And suddenly I was out at Starbucks and I've been out shopping all day, grocery shopping, I was exhausted, and it just poured out of me. So that's exactly how it appears in the book. And the other one, like Seth says, is just switching between the projects. Like sometimes I just burnt out from writing or burnt out from drawing. I'll just switch workstations or work at a stand-up desk. And if none of that works, all that takes is going for a walk.
Yeah.
Or forgetting about it for a while, watch a movie, come back, and it's there.
Well, I mean, it's like the encyclopedia of supplements and stuff you've written for the Mutant Epoch is staggering to me. It's like it seems like he spends every single second writing. He must, because it's just so much.
I set out to be a novelist.
Yeah.
And I have a huge novel series for the Mutant Epoch that I wrote, and then I abandoned it for 10 years to work on the RPG, and now I'm going back. So the novels are coming out next spring, should start coming out. They're all written, they're just waiting for the next edit pass.
Yeah.
So there's no shortage, but then one inspires the other one, right? You're working on the game, and man, that'd be cool. And then you play the game with your friends, and they come up with some idea, like, oh, I never thought of that before. So it's kind of a collaborative project.
I will say though, the better ideas are the further away you are from a way of writing or recording that idea down.
Where's my notepad?
Yeah, so if I'm driving and it's going to take me 30 minutes to get somewhere, it's like, oh, that's going to be the best idea.
Toren in the shower, they're like, apparently there's a notepad you can write on in the shower.
Well, that's he just shouts that to me and John, or just sitting around watching.
Write this down.
The idea.
Kind of leading into that exhaustion thing though too, that it's going to sound weird to say, but the best thing that ever happened to my RPG writing career was COVID.
Yeah.
I developed some breathing issues before COVID happened, so when it hit and everything went to crap, I'm a postal worker, and basically my doctor said, okay, if you catch COVID, you're going to die, so don't go back to work. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going back to work then. So I was off work for a year, and Canada Post still paid me my wage for that entire year, so it was a really good experience. So I had a year of nothing to do but write, and I was like, this is glorious. And now I'm back to work. I don't have the same time and the same lack of exhaustion, and that's a big part of what's hurting me. I think it's like finding that time and being rested mentally and physically to get back into it. So it's about making that time and having your mind rested and ready for it. Doug.
I walk. I go for walks, Chilliwack Valley, the Great Blue Heron Reserve where I live, and I don't think about writing. I think about, wow, that's a cool bird, or wow, I'm tired. I've just gone all over the place, and I'm going to go home and have lunch.
Yeah.
And I get home, and then the ideas are there. The relaxation. The other thing is the gym. Exercise helps, and it may not be the gym every day because you can afford it. But the gym once a week, you just sit on the bike and you ride the bike and you do your exercises and whatever, and you look out the window and some stupid idea comes into your mind and you go, that's it. That's where I was stuck.
For inspiration, Doug.
Well,
You'll just be sitting and talking to someone and start
It's that blank
spouting off
slate.
ideas.
You're not looking, because if you're too busy looking, you're not going to see it. So you kind of hit that empty blank slate also.
Like,
there
and I can't get the word.
Let it come to you. Don't go looking for it.
Yeah, don't go looking for
it. We were pretty much.
Yeah, exactly. I was basically going to throw out for another question if somebody has one. Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
How do you guys do collaboration or like talking with another writer about your writing? Like if you meet up with someone and try to talk about it, because I'm trying to do NaNoWriMo next month, and I'm looking for how do I meet up with friends that are also writing and be effective in a meeting that will help me.
I hear good things about the internet.
Worked for me.
You ever tried to shower?
Meeting
Yeah,
people in the shower.
yeah. TorrensShowerIdeas.com. It's kind of his OnlyFans.
Try to find, I don't know, this phrase has been used a million times, try to find like-minded people.
Yeah.
And by like-minded people, not writers. Look at what an artist does. Throw an idea out there and see what the artist turns it into. And then throw it to another writer. And what the artist did and what the other writer says, and you look at that and go, wow, this is great. Let's talk about this as a group. Because creativity spawns creativity.
Yeah.
To coin you, I think it was desperation through incompetency or necessity through incompetency. James threw that out and I went, yeah, I can't do all these things, so I need all these people.
Yeah.
Here's an idea, and the artist goes, oh yeah, it looks like that. And you go, it does? And they go, yes, it does. And you look back and then you talk to another writer and he goes, oh yeah, it definitely looks like that. So don't be afraid to move outside the writers group. And again, the internet.
I will say on one thing with like working in writers groups that I have found is, so if you write something, you show it to your best friend or you show it to your mom or whoever, it's great, they love it, it's so good. Find yourself some like real critical authors who can just be savagely blunt with you. And it is not going to help your ego, but it will make you better. And I have entire friendships that have lasted 20 years that are completely based off our ability to like very kindly eviscerate the hell out of each other because we're trying to help. And that's the good thing with the Good Writers Workshop, because somebody can look at what you're doing, and they can tell you not just if something's wrong, they can tell you where and why, and kind of talk you through that. But you're going to develop thick skin pretty dang fast, and you need to not take it personally, because it is coming from that, hey, we're going to help you out. And if you can join any of those groups where it is kind of a back and forth, because the other best tool I've ever found for teaching how to write is how to learn how to like be a critic to other authors, because you have to figure out how to articulate what doesn't seem right. To a customer, they'd be like, well, it's just something about it I didn't like, but they have no idea what that is, or they'll tell you what it is and they're wrong. That's actually not what it was at all. And you have to actually be trained to learn how to find that and identify it and verbalize it. And you can only get that through learning to critique. So that's the good thing with the writers group, is you will get that brutal honesty and that ability to critique. Because sometimes you'll find that like criticisms you make very often, you'll finally then look back at your own stuff and be like, oh, goddamn.
Oh yeah.
I know I understood what people said that, because now that I've learned how to see it, you can see it in your own stuff. So
My two right hands are both people who have told me to my face, your work sucks, here's how to fix it. Like,
as long as they can be constructive about it. I think any artist or creator needs to have some thick skin and understand the critique is going to happen, whether you like it or not. The hope is it can be constructive, that somebody has something to add to it, say, this is what I didn't like for this reason. If somebody says to you, this sucks, and walks away, that's not worth anything.
no, it's worthless.
No, and again, it's easy to say don't let that affect you, but don't let that affect you. It's meaningless.
Most of Toren's videos of him just crying in the shower.
Those get the most views.
just I'm a fraud crying. It's like, John and I like how they feel that.
Well, I think we've hit our time here. I'd like to thank everyone for participating in this. Like Toren, this was wonderful, and thank you all for showing up and bringing your questions and stuff. Hopefully we can do this again someday. Thank you for coming. Thank you. Then cut.